Namaste. Today is the third day of August 2022 and the 150th year of Sri Aurobindo's birth. We are here to do the Life Divine with our beloved Ranga. And we are on page 328, beginning with the paragraph, Our Fundamental Cognition of the Absolute.
We will do what we normally do. We will make a brief summary of the previous chapter, the paragraph, so that we have the sense of continuity of what he's saying. So, he's saying the previous para, the overmind consciousness, which is just one plane below the supermind. It's the last plane of the mental regions, and below, over the supermind, over the overmind, you go into the supermind. The overmind consciousness cannot give us the solution we are seeking. So what is the solution we are seeking for the problem? We want to know the origin of existence, the origin of the universe, and we also want to solve the problem of the dualities. There are dualities, but we want to see oneness. What is one single origin? Because we have started from the Advaita philosophy. The one, only one single truth. So, the overmind cannot give you that solution. That's what he's saying. The truth has to be found in the plane above the overmind, which is the supermind. Then he says, but our mind, the normal human mind, is a half-developed consciousness and is in ignorance and does not see the reality. It sees only the end results, the forms of the universe. The process of making the forms, the origin and the execution of the forms, it does not see. It sees only the end forms. We feel that that's only reality. Actually, it's the end result of the formation of the universe. The forms in the universe. The supermind, on the contrary, sees the origin of the universe and understands the total harmony from which all the forms in the cosmos originate. We see the origin and also the end result. The end result being the universe. The one issues out of itself into itself all the many that are latent in it. The universe is nothing but a self-expression of the supreme reality. That's what he's saying. Just like the painting is a result of whatever is latent in a painter, or the poem is latent in the poet, and he expresses it. That's exactly what the universe is. The universe is an expression of the supreme reality. That is the reason why everything in the physical world has some distant link with the supreme reality. This is what the many other philosophies deny. They say that there is no connection between the supreme reality and the physical world. There is no reality, so therefore we have to go there. But Sri Aurobindo's philosophy hinges on this, that there is a connection, and that connection is also bridgeable. Even if there is a connection, some philosophies say there is a connection, but it is, you have to go there only to get the divine. Okay? And the Mayavada philosophy, the Buddhist philosophy, they say that there is a gulf. There is the illusion and the unreality, and there is a reality on top, and it cannot be bridged. They two will be eternally separate. Sri Aurobindo, of course, does not agree. There is a connection and there is a link, and you can, through yogic processes and growth of consciousness, go from the lowest to the highest. And that's what he calls evolution. Evolution of the individual as well as evolution, universal evolution. Okay? So, after this we will start reading the paragraph that we have to read today. Our fundamental cognition of the Absolute, our substantial spiritual experience of it, is an intuition or the direct experience of an infinite and eternal existence, an infinite and eternal consciousness, an infinite eternal delight of existence. In overmental and mental cognition, it is possible to make discrete and even to separate this original unity into three self-existent aspects. For we can experience a total causeless eternal bliss so intense that we are that alone. Existence, consciousness seem to be swallowed up in it, no longer ostensibly in presence. A similar experience of pure and absolute consciousness and a similar exclusive identity with it is possible, and there can be too a like identifying experience of pure and absolute existence. But to a supermind cognition, these three are always an inseparable trinity, even though one can stand in front of the others and manifest its own spiritual determinants. We'll discuss that. For each has its primal aspects or its inherent self-formations, but all of these together are original in the triune absolute. Love, joy, and beauty are the fundamental determinants of the divine delight of existence. And we can see at once that these are the very stuff and nature of that delight. They are not alien impositions on the being of the Absolute or creations supported by it, but outside it. They are truths of its being, native to its consciousness, power of its force of existence. So too is it with the fundamental determinants of the absolute consciousness, knowledge and will. They are truths and powers of the original consciousness force and are inherent in its very nature. This authenticity becomes still more evident when we regard the fundamental spiritual determinants of the absolute existence. They are its triune powers, necessary first postulates for all its self-creation or manifestation. Self, the divine, the conscious being, Atman, Ishvara, Purusha. So, we'll go through each sentence and see what he's saying. So, our fundamental cognition of the Absolute. When you go into a spiritual consciousness at its highest, what is your experience of it? That's what he's telling you. Our substantial spiritual experience of it is the intuition or the direct experience of an infinite eternal existence, infinite eternal consciousness, infinite eternal delight. In other words, Satchidananda. So, the fundamental cognition, the last reality which you can experience, either through intuition, you must be thinking that the divine must be like this. It's an intuition that comes into the mind, or a direct experience. You can actually experience this Satchidananda. But when you experience it, something interesting happens. That's what he's saying now. Okay, so. And note, existence, consciousness, delight, and all he is repeating for stress. It is infinite, it is eternal. It is infinite, eternal. It is infinite, eternal. He is stressing. Okay? They are not limited and they are not in time. Okay? So, in overmental and mental cognition, it is possible to make discrete and even to separate the original unity into three self-existent aspects. So, let's understand what he's saying. Below the supermind, in the overmind and also in the mental cognition means the higher mind, illumined mind, intuitive mind and overmind. These he calls the ideal planes, or he also calls them the spiritual planes of consciousness. In level 2, for our clarity, we call it level 2. Level 1 is what we are. We are in the consciousness of the body, life and mind. And we see the world, and for us it is true. And we see multiplicity. We see the many. So now he is saying, in this up to the overmind level, we can see the many. That's what he means by discrete. So I'll give you an image to make it very clear. In the supermind, you see a whole picture. You see the entire reality. You come down to the overmind consciousness, or even in the supermind, there are 3 grades, okay? Grade 1, grade 2, grade 3. The triple status of the supermind, he deals with this. So, you are seeing the whole picture in the supermind. In the lesser level of the supermind, you are a puzzle maker, and you cut up that picture you want to cut it into a jigsaw puzzle. Okay? So, you draw the lines where you are going to cut. In the third level of the supermind, you have cut it, but you have not separated it. So, you still see the whole picture. Come down into the overmind consciousness and you separate each piece 1 centimeter. Okay? Now, are you seeing the picture? You are seeing with a little difficulty. You go back and you'll say, oh, I can see in spite of the 1 centimeter gap between each one, I can see the reality. So in the overmind consciousness, you can see glimpses of the unity, but you can also see the multiplicity. At our level, the distance of 1 centimeter between each jigsaw puzzle has gone to 1 meter. Now you are seeing only the pieces. Interesting image to make you understand this. So, as you keep going up, so we see the jigsaw puzzle and we don't understand. What is this part of? What is this stone? What is that river? Are they all connected? No, they don't seem to be connected at all. So, this is what he's saying. And he's using an interesting word. He's saying, in overmental and mental cognition, it is possible to make discrete and even separate the original unity. So, what does it mean to make discrete? Interesting word he's using. To make separate. Okay? So, see the distinctions. You have to use your discretion in certain matters. You have to understand the true from the false. So, he's using the word discrete and very interesting. To make separations. In our overmind consciousness and mental consciousness, it's possible to make discretion. It is possible to make discrete and even to separate the original unity into 3 self-distinct aspects. What are the 3 self-distinct aspects? Sat, Chit, Ananda. So, existence, consciousness and bliss. Consciousness, normally we don't add Shakti, but that is also possible. So, he is saying now in this, we'll read sentence and then go into it. He is saying, we see them separately. So, in the spiritual planes of consciousness, he is saying that you can experience consciousness alone. And when you are experiencing consciousness, Sat and Ananda have got absorbed into it. You are not seeing them. You are seeing only consciousness, discrete. Then, if you go into existence, consciousness and Ananda are absorbed into it. And you see only existence. We'll go into existence a little later. Then, when you are in the Ananda consciousness, consciousness and existence don't seem to exist. It is possible to experience fully one aspect only. That's what he's saying. It is possible, but it's also, you can have a combination also. That also is possible. Okay? So, but to supermind consciousness, these 3 are always inseparable unity. Inseparable trinity, sorry. They cannot be separated from each other. They are completely involved in each other. Now we'll go a little into that existence. Okay? The existence, remember, uses the word which is a substance. But it's a substance which is very, very subtle. And when he uses the word substance, he means the same stuff which has become gross. Matter. Okay? So, existence is substance, and it is a substance which is conscious, and which is full of Ananda, and it's also got power. And you can experience in the spiritual planes, you can experience them separately. If you experience, that's the next chapter actually. If you Brahman, Purusha, Ishvara, Maya, Prakriti, Shakti. So if you experience only existence, that is so real to you that the physical world is unreal. You end up with the Mayavada philosophy, the Buddhistic philosophy. If you experience a consciousness, okay, the world seems to be mechanical, unconscious energy. You end up with the Sankhya philosophy. Then if you experience the Ananda aspect only, then you end up with the theory of the Vaishnavism Leela. The world is a play of the divine. Okay? So it's possible. That's the reason why there are so many different philosophies. So in the overmind consciousness, you are seeing some oneness, but you are seeing also the separateness. And so those who have gone only up to the overmind consciousness will deal with only the experience that they have had. So you have all these philosophies. Mayavada, Buddhism, Sankhya, okay, the Leela, Vaishnavism, Advaita philosophy, all these things are because of the overmind consciousness. You go into the supermind consciousness, everything is one, and all of these philosophies are partially true. Not a single one is fully wrong, they are all partially true. It depends at which level you are. Okay? So, that's what he's saying. So, an inseparable trinity in the supermind. Even though one can stand in front of the others and manifest its own spiritual determinates. Now he is using the word determinates. So, a determinate and an indeterminate. So, let's take 2-3 examples to understand determinate and indeterminate. If I take energy, it is the indeterminate. It does not have a specific form. But that energy can become electrical. It can become biocurrents in the body. It can become thermal energy. It can become nuclear energy. So these are the determinates, very, very clear aspects of that one infinite, eternal energy. Okay? Or to take a more gross example, take molten metal. Okay? You take iron ore and put it in a furnace, the slag comes out and the iron ore is coming in. Okay, the molten iron is coming out. Okay, now that is formless, but I can make that into, that's a indeterminate, because it doesn't have a determinable form. Now that I can make into plates, I can make into wires, I can make into railway tracks. So the molten metal is the indeterminate and these things are the determinates. So determinate means its characteristics can be described, but that you cannot describe the characteristics. So the whole universe is like that. The highest is the indeterminate, and when you come down, the first determinates of Satchidananda are Sat, Chit, Ananda. They become separate, and now each one also again becomes infinitely separate.
So if we melted a form of iron, it would become indeterminate again.
Yes, that's right. So down the line, is this process ever ending? No, it never ends. It goes on and on. So any one stage if you take, the stage above that is the indeterminate, and the stage below that is the determinate. So itself it can become the indeterminate or the one below. Okay? So this is what the whole chapter is about. So the Satchidananda breaks itself up into the determinates of Sat, Chit, Ananda. In the overmind it's all one, indeterminate. Then now he is telling you that existence can become infinite substances. Oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen, iron, plutonium, uranium, thorium, anything you want. These are all the determinates of the substance. Then you take consciousness. Consciousness divides it into knowledge and will. And Ananda divides itself into, he's telling you, we'll read that. Okay? So,
you say love,
Ananda divides itself into love, joy, beauty.
And beauty, yes.
And note interestingly that even in the physical world, they are so intimately connected. Love, joy and beauty. Each one can produce the other. If there is love, it can produce joy. At our level, it can also produce a little bit of sorrow also, but that's another matter. Okay? And it also, when you see the beauty of something, you can love it. So, there are three. So, Ananda becomes love, joy and beauty are the fundamental determinants of the divine delight of existence. And we can see at once that these are the very stuff and nature of that delight. They are not alien impositions on the being of the Absolute or creation supported by it, but outside it. It is not like that. They are truths of its being, native to its consciousness, powers of its force of existence. This sentence here, he is denying the Mayavada philosophy. The Mayavada philosophy says that there is a consciousness which is absolutely pure and featureless and static, like the cinema screen. Okay? And the events of the physical world are the images being thrown on the cinema screen. So the screen is separate and the images being thrown on the screen are actually separate, but you don't see the distinction. You are watching the film and you are not even conscious of the screen. This is our condition. We are seeing the images, that's all the forms in the universe, and we feel that they are real. But the Mayavada philosophy says, no, they are only reflections on a screen. The reality is the screen. Remove the images, what remains? Only the consciousness of the self, the Brahman consciousness. So he is denying here. He is saying that's not true. He is saying that these things also, the determinants are also real. All the forms that you see in the physical world there is a reality behind the apparent form. That's what he's saying. Read that sentence again. Okay? They are not alien impositions on the being of the Absolute. Which one? He's talking of love, joy and beauty are not, they seem to be separate. Love, joy and beauty are fundamental determinants. And we can see at once that these are very stuff and nature of the delight. They are not alien impositions on the being of the Absolute or creation supported by it, but outside it. It is neither that nor this. Okay, he is making a distinction. One is impositions on the Absolute. Second possibility, creations supported by it, but outside it. Okay, that means like the poet and the poem. It's not even like that, he's saying. Okay? Like the artist and his painting. They're two separate things. But essentially they are the same. That's what he's saying. The world and Satchidananda are essentially the same.
But what about these alien impositions?
Yeah, alien means it has nothing to do with the world. The image being thrown on the screen has nothing to do with the screen. It's an alien imposition. That's what it means. So the physical world that you see is an alien imposition upon the screen of your consciousness. Okay? And that's a Mayavada philosophy. Srimad is denying. Saying, no, see carefully and you will see that they are all connected and all are real. But you have to rise to a very high level of consciousness to see that. Okay? So too is it with the fundamental determinants of the Absolute consciousness, knowledge and will. Okay? They separate themselves into knowledge and will. They are truths and powers of the original consciousness force and are inherent in its very nature. This authenticity becomes still more evident when we regard the fundamental spiritual determinants of an absolute existence. That it becomes absolutely clear that absolute existence divides itself up first of all into 5 states: ether, air, fire, water, earth. They are levels of consciousness. They are not actually ether, air, fire, water. They are only images to make you understand. Okay? That ether means very, very subtle. But that substance can become slightly less subtle, air. It becomes even more subtle, even less subtle, fire, then water and earth. They are all nothing but the substance which is taking different forms. So they are the first fundamental, 5 fundamental determinants. And each one again separates itself into 100,000 things. Just like life, another image also you can take. Life is indeterminate. It produces, according to biology and recent research, vertebrates and invertebrates. Okay? Invertebrates, 8 groups again. Vertebrates, again 5 major groups. Then mammals. Mammals again can become horses, dogs, cats, whatnot. So different. This is what he's saying. So now we go to the last sentence. And when we regard the fundamental spiritual of absolute existence, they become even more striking, because when I was at school, we used to say that there are 90 elements. Now they have gone to 190 elements. They have discovered more and more. And they are bound to discover more and more. Pure elements, not combinations. Okay? Stainless steel is a combination. Zinc is an original product. Iron is not steel. Steel is a combination of carbon and iron. So these pure elements, there are 190, you will discover more and more. So that's what Swami is saying. Okay? And it goes on, there is no end to it. Na? Suppose you take carbon, it can become coal, but it can also become diamond. Diamond is nothing but carbon.
I have a joke from Jyoti Priya. A diamond is just a piece of coal that stuck to its job.
There you are. But we don't care so much for the coal, but we care very much for that. Okay, so finally he is saying that the absolute existence are triune powers, necessary first postulates for all its self-creation or manifestation. Self, the divine, conscious being, Atman, Ishvara, Purusha. Okay? The self is the conscious being, and Atman, Purusha, Ishvara. 3 different levels. Okay? So, this is what he said in the para. Satchidananda divides itself into 3, and each of these 3 divide themselves again into others. But all of them are real and not alien impositions. They are all real. Mayavadins are saying they are not real. Buddhists are saying they are not real. But he sticks to this, that there is a connection and there is a gradation. But reality is not compromised. Okay. If we pursue the process of self-manifestation farther, we shall see that each of these aspects or powers reposes in its first action on a triad or trinity. For knowledge inevitably takes its stand in a trinity of the knower, the known, and knowledge. Love finds itself in a trinity of the lover, the beloved, and love. Will is self-fulfilled in a trinity of the Lord of the will, the object of the will, and the executive force. Joy has its original and utter gladness in a trinity of the enjoyer, the enjoyed, and the delight that unites them. Self as inevitably appears and founds its manifestation in a trinity of self as subject, self as object, and self-awareness, holding together self as subject-object. Okay? The subject is looking at the object, and the connection between them is the third element. These and other primal powers and aspects assume their status among the fundamental spiritual self-determinations of the infinite. Okay? All others are determinates of the fundamental spiritual determinates, significant relations, significant powers, significant forms of being, consciousness, force, delight, energies, conditions, ways, lines of the truth process of the conscious force of the eternal, imperatives, possibilities, actualities of its manifestation. All this deploying of powers and possibilities and their inherent consequences is held together by supermind cognition in an intimate oneness. It keeps them founded consciously on the original truth and maintained in the harmony of the truths they manifest and are in their nature. There is here no imposition of imaginations, no arbitrary creation, neither is there any division, fragmentation, irreconcilable contrariety or disparateness. But in mind of ignorance, these phenomena appear. For there a limited consciousness sees and deals with everything as if it were all separate objects of cognition or separate existences, and it seeks so to know, possess and enjoy them, and gets mastery over them or suffers their mastery. But behind its ignorance, what the soul in it is seeking for is the reality, the truth, the consciousness, the power, the delight by which they exist. The mind has to learn to awaken to this true seeking and true knowledge veiled within itself, to the reality from which all things hold their truth, to the consciousness of which all consciousness are entities, to the power from which all get what force of being they have within them, to the delight of which all delights are partial figures. This limitation of consciousness and this awakening to the integrality of consciousness are also a process of self-manifestation, are a self-determination of the spirit. Even when contrary to the truth in their appearances, the things of the limited consciousness have in their deeper sense and reality a divine significance. They too bring out a truth. They too bring out a truth or a possibility of the infinite. Of some such nature, as far as it can be expressed in mental formulas, would be the supramental cognition of things, which sees the one truth everywhere and would so arrange its account to us for our existence, its report of the secret of creation and the significance of the universe. Huge para. And he is saying that everything starts from one, becomes the many. The many are not the falsehood, they are also the truths. This is basically what he is saying. Now, this idea of determinate and indeterminate, while reading I got another idea. So, we'll discuss that also a little bit. It will help to understand this process of one becoming the many. So, take a human cell. We are all human beings and we have in us flesh, bones, okay? We have cartilage, we have light sensitive retina, we have nail, so many different types of substances in the body. But we have started from one single cell. That one single cell, when it is fertilized, okay, the ovary when it is fertilized by the sperm, it starts dividing itself. It divides itself into two first. Then it goes by geometric progression and the 2 become 4. And the 4 become 8. 8 becomes 16. 16 becomes 32, etc. Now, at what point does bone tissue appear, muscle tissue appear, light sensitive retina tissue appear, nail tissue appear? At what point? There is a point when it starts appearing. That is what you call the Stem cell is the word. So that stem cell is now in a condition where it can take any form it wants. So if you take that stem cell and put it with bone, it will develop into bone tissue. If you take that and put it with muscle tissue, it will become muscle tissue. So the one becoming the many, and slowly there is muscle tissue, there is bone tissue, there is cartilage tissue, there is nail tissue, there is light sensitive tissue, cartilage, so many different types of things.
Is the stem cell making it or joining with it?
What? It becomes.
It
I mean, this is a biological question, but I'm not an expert in that.
Stem cell has power to make anything.
But they don't actually do that, because when you take a stem cell and use it for experiment, you are destroying a life. So that's a problem. There is an amount of research being done there is, I think, limited. I'm not sure of what I'm saying, but I think this is what I've read. Okay? So it's a very big one, but basically this is how it happens. The one becoming the many, and all of them are connected, and it's a very, very logical system, and you can see what is it. Start looking at the beginning. We look into each sentence, because I feel that to read Sri Aurobindo, you have to understand his use of words, because a word is a word, but what is meant by that word, if you go into carefully detail, then you start to understand what he's saying. So we start looking at it. If we pursue the process of self-manifestation further, he means the one becoming the many, which is the self-manifestation. Self-manifestation, why self? Because itself it is becoming what it is. In the case of an artist producing a painting, the essence of it is self-manifestation. But the painting is not the painter. So, but here he is saying the world is nothing but the manifestation of the self itself. It molds itself into all these things. It's not taking a foreign material and making something. That's what he means by self-manifestation. When a company is making a mobile, it is taking material from outside and making it. Okay? But here, the divine is using his own material and creating, that's why self-manifestation. Okay? The word self is very meaningful. We have to understand exactly what he's saying. I give you an example of what is not self-manifestation. You take a metal piece which is not you and make it into a vessel. But it is not self-manifestation. It is manifested but different. But here it is self-manifestation. The world is nothing but self-manifestation of the divine. If we pursue the process of self-manifestation further, we shall see that each of these aspects or powers reposes in its first action on a triad or trinity. And he is giving examples. For knowledge inevitably takes its stand in a trinity of the knower, the known, and knowledge. All three are connected but different.
so clear. So very clear.
That's right. Okay. So knowledge divides itself into knower, known, and knowledge. Similarly, love finds itself in a trinity of the lover, the beloved, and love. Okay? So, none of them are really the same, but they have come from the same source and it becomes these three. Will is self-fulfilled in a trinity of the Lord of the will, the object of the will, and the executive force. The willer, the willed, and the will. If you want to make it very obvious. Okay. Then, joy has its original and utter gladness in a trinity of the enjoyer, the enjoyed, and the delight that unites them. Okay? So, self as inevitably appears and founds its manifestation in a trinity of self as subject, self as object, and self-awareness, holding together self as subject-object. Okay? So, self as subject is clear. I am the subject. Self as object. I am watching myself. I can watch my thoughts. I can watch my emotions. So, I am watching myself. My emotions, my thoughts are myself. So, inevitably appears found is self as subject, self as object, and self-awareness holding together self as subject-object. These and other primal powers and aspects assume their status among the fundamental spiritual self-determinations of the infinite. This is what happens in the indeterminate and determinate. All others are determinates of the fundamental spiritual determinates. So what are the fundamental spiritual determinates? Sat, Chit, Ananda. Each one becomes again three. That's he said. Okay. So now he says it can go into further divisions. And what are those divisions? Look carefully. Okay. So 1 second. All other are determinates of the fundamental spiritual determinates. Significant relations, significant powers, significant forms of being. Consciousness, force, delight. So again he is coming to being is Sat, consciousness is Chit, force is Shakti, and delight is Ananda. Energies, conditions, ways, lines of the truth process of the conscious force of the eternal. Now, imperatives, possibilities, actualities of its manifestation. So now, whatever is possible is being created. Some of these things which are created are imperatives. They become absolute realities in the physical world. Some are possibilities kept over for some future. And actualities which have already come into existence.
So the imperatives
is the highest. It is bound to become. Then the next one is the possibility. That imperative can become two things. So they are possibilities. Then the possibility becomes an actuality. So there also you can see a gradation. No? So actuality is the manifestation. All this deploying of powers and possibilities. Note the word deploying. When an army has to fight a battle, the general says, okay, 100 soldiers I'll send here, 100 soldiers I'll send here, 200 here, and then the deploying. So this deploying is one army being separated into different units. The word deploying means exactly that. Okay? So in fact they use the word deploy even for military purposes also they use that. The powers and possibilities of their inherent consequences is held together by supermind. But all these things, although they are separate, in the supermind they are all one. That's what he's saying. So possibilities, imperatives, possibilities, actualities. Now this is highly interesting. Sri Aurobindo says in 1920, India is going to be free. Imperative.
Didn't he say mother saw it? He said mother saw that India was free.
Yeah. Now, imperative. But the possibility that India will not become Akhanda Bharat, but it will split into Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. Finally, that's the actuality. It's interesting. The imperative is, yes, India will be free. Okay? Seen 30 years before its actual appearance. That's the imperative. Then the possibility. Could it be into two or could it be into one? Okay? And finally the actuality, it became even three. Now there is a possibility, if you are following the latest trends, what is happening, all these will again come back into one. Okay? And they coming into one need not be a physical unity, but it could be in the form of a federation or like the EU, European Union. All the countries are different. But there is no fundamental difference. There are no borders. There are no customs duties. There is one currency. So that sort of unity is also likely here. In fact, the starting point is already there, SAARC. South Asian Association of Regional Countries. SAARC. So it could become like that.
Which would also be Mother's map.
Yes, that's right. In fact, already this thing has started. It's going into a little politics I should not discuss. But it's very relevant to what we are seeing here. Okay, Pakistan occupied Kashmir is already demanding freedom from Pakistan. Balochistan also is doing the same.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sri Lanka is not on the verge, it has collapsed. And Pakistan is about to collapse.
Yeah.
So, actualities. Okay, so very interesting. To note the words, huh? Imperatives, possibilities, actualities of its manifestation. All this deploying of powers and possibilities and their inherent consequences is held together by supermind, cognition, in an intimate oneness. It keeps them founded consciously on the original truth and maintained in the harmony of the truths they manifest and are in their nature. There is here no imposition of imaginations, no arbitrary creation, neither is there any division, fragmentation, irreconcilable contrariety or disparateness. In the supermind, there is no division and no imposition and no imagination, but in the spiritual planes of consciousness, you do seem to think that they are different. There is a consciousness and the actualities are being imposed on it. That's what he's saying. So depending on which level you are. But if you are at the supramental level, there is only oneness and all these are together. Trikala Drishti. You see the past, present and the future. You see the future also. That's why Srivamda could say that. No? That India will be free. And Mother said, India is not will be free. It is already free in the subtle world.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So, no imagine, irreconcilable. But, in mind of ignorance, these phenomena appear. What are the phenomena? Possibilities, actualities, differences. No? So, all the phenomena appear. For there is a limited for there, a limited consciousness sees and deals with everything as if all were separate objects of cognition or separate existences, and it seeks so to know, possess and enjoy them and get mastery over them or suffer their mastery. He is talking about human condition. Okay, we try to master the floods, the storms, but they are mostly mastering us. We suffer their consequences. So that's what he's saying. It becomes like this in the physical world. Okay? So, man sees them as separate and tries to understand, know and possess. He doesn't see the oneness of things. That's the whole point. These phenomena appear. For there is a limited consciousness. For there, the limited consciousness sees, deals with everything as if they were separate objects of cognition. In other words, there is no separateness at all in reality. They are all one. Just like all of us are sitting here, our bodies are all seeming to be separate, but they are essentially the same. There is flesh, bone, tissue, everywhere, all of them. The oneness is there, inherent, but we don't see it. That's what he's saying. You go to the higher level of consciousness, you will see the oneness.
So this world is perfect.
Pardon?
This world is perfect from that vision.
Depending, from that vision. That's right. So, know, possess and enjoy them and gets mastery over them or suffers their mastery. But behind its ignorance, what the soul in it is seeking is for the reality, the truth, the consciousness, the power, the delight. So, all of us Sometimes they are seeking only reality, sometimes truth, sometimes consciousness. Some people are asking for power, some for delight, by which they exist. The mind has to learn to awaken to this true seeking and true knowledge veiled within itself, to the reality from which all things hold their truth, to the consciousness of which all consciousnesses are entities, to the power from which all get what force of being they have within them, to the delight of which all delights are partial figures. This limitation of consciousness and this awakening to the integrality of consciousness are also a process of self-manifestation, are a self-determination of the spirit. Even when contrary to the truth in their appearances, the things of the limited consciousness have in their deeper sense and reality a divine significance. So what he's saying is that everything in the physical world has a divine significance. Even in their opposite, note. Even when contrary to the truth in their appearances. In other words, he is saying that falsehood also has a purpose and truth is there. There is generosity and there is miserliness. Both have a purpose in the physical world. Okay? Truth and untruth. Error and no error. Both have got, truth and error are both also necessary for the world. Light and darkness are both necessary for the world. He's saying they have their significance. We can understand to a certain extent mentally, we can say that if there is only light, okay, we won't give enough value to it. Only if there is darkness, we know what light is. Okay? And if there is falsehood, and you feel the falsehood, you will want to have truth. If there is no falsehood, you will be static. You won't try to progress. So that's why this is the purpose that is there, he is talking about. Okay? Of some such nature, as far as it can be expressed in mental formulas, would be the supramental cognition of things, which sees the one truth everywhere and would so arrange its account to us of our existence, its report of the secret of creation and the significance of the universe. So when you go to the supramental level, all the contraries, the problems are solved. At the moral level, we want to go from falsehood to truth, from ignorance to knowledge. We want to go from inconscience to consciousness. But there is a purpose to it. Here we deny the purpose of all these negatives. But there you see the purpose. You see everything and you understand the origin of creation and you also understand why all these things exist in the physical world.
It's report. It's report.
Yeah. It's a report of the secret of creation and the significance of the universe. In other words, when you go there, the secret is revealed to you. It reports to you the significance of the universe. That's what it means.